closing this chapter of Fantasy Football Till Death. That and more this week out in space. Bringing it back around to the point in time from where we started, we are still on Earth within the Milky Way galaxy in our local group, the Laniakea supercluster, within our observable universe. We have a new updated background image. This is the module that launched off of Artemis 1 some 2 short years ago. This is our familiar moon, and that's home right there. And in current news, Artemis 2 is scheduled to roll out to the launch platform today, which opens up the February 6th, which is 3-4 weeks off from now, launch of humans returning to lunar flight. This is Artemis 2, where we're going to take humans around the moon, and Artemis 3 is when we land on the moon for the first time in 50 plus years. I'm Kendall. I'm in Vancouver, Washington. We have Brendan here with us in Silver Springs, Maryland. Evan was scheduled to be on with us, and we're hoping that we've kicked off enough vibes into the multiverse to awaken him in Boise, Idaho. The rest of the league, we have Grant Simmons, who's still scheduled to be wed to Danny in the summer of 26. Jason and Gregory, Eddie, Izzy, and Luca. Luke and Dom Ho technically still in the league with his Naomi. Springfield with his girls, Emily, Charlie, and Lily. Evan, as aforementioned, in Boise. Thomas with his pair, Jess and Beckham. Sam with Hannah and Scar. Ben still out in Wisconsin with Lise, Josiah, and Micah. Brendan, Ari, Caleb still going strong. Casey, Luna with his girls, Lisa and Emmy, and Hunter, who is dating Courtney. I've got why, bringing us back to the same concept of we are here for this consistent and meaningful social connection that Fantasy Football Till Death brings us. When we are 19 days after the Rams and Falcons decided our championship match. How did we get here? I still don't have any answers. It is a mystery to me, and I'm figuring it out as I go. A quick recap of what's going on in the world. The Trump administration continues to escalate tensions in Minnesota with escalating ICE presence, Greenland annexation crisis, and the potential fall of NATO, the U.S. military action in Venezuela, escalating unrest in Iran following the collapse of the currency and following protests, and the global hunger emergency along with climate disasters following record heat in 2025. Bringing it into the here and now, I have not had the restful winter that I was hoping for. We've had some tensions at home, things that have caused a little bit of strife between Mel and I, but nothing that we haven't been able to slowly manage. We are planning on moving at the end of the month. In a few weeks here now, we're not moving anywhere far. We're going to be staying within Vancouver. We currently have 0 yard for our girls to run around, and we are looking for that yard to kick them out in the spring and let them do their thing. Mel's work situation is up in the air as well. There's a request to bring her back into the office, and they may or may not be getting rid of her position. So who knows what's going on with that. Bigger announcements. Springfield's have moved to Houston. It's going to make a Houston, we have a problem, but not a problem. They made it over successfully as far as I've heard. So please check in with Griffin and see what's going on with them in their new part of the world. And I'm happy to announce we have 2 new babies coming to the group. Tom and Jess made their announcement earlier, and it is my absolute pleasure to usher in Brendan and Ari, expecting their second later this early summer, right, Brendan?
Yeah, I think we got numero dos coming in August, late July. Pretty sure.
August, late July. Good.
Yep.
And final major note, wanted to share with the league that Brendan had a major health event in late October, suffering, what was it, 1 major stroke and a minor stroke, Brendan? Do you want to just give a quick color on that?
Wow, I didn't expect that all to go through the whole timeline for that. Yeah, no, I did have a stroke on October 23rd. And it was funny. I think the last time we did our last show, if I recall, that was like in early November. So that was probably a couple weeks after it happened after that. So I'm sure that my mind was a little bit of a fog. So apologize for the crappy show, guys.
No apologies necessary, Brendan. And I'm also happy to report that you went back to work yesterday, right? And we had a little bit of chat on just the shit nature of the recruiting industry as a whole. But I have zero lack of confidence that you won't be able to navigate that situation, Brendan. And then to wrap us up, January was a big birthday month for us. Ari and Luca have already had their birthdays. Springfield and Lily are coming up, and then Caleb is closing the chapter at the end of this. Man, you guys have a lot of birthdays, don't you, Brendan? The January birthdays, having your family.
We got two. Ari's was just last Wednesday, and then with the other guy watching Bluey outside my room here. He's on the 31st, last day of January. He'll turn 4, but he's a tree, he's massive, only bigger, man.
I would expect nothing less. All right, turning the page, Brendan. Looking in a retrospect on the season, what was your special sauce this year?
Special sauce? Put Reishi rice on the trade table. No, man. You know, it's funny you say that. Yeah, I would love to kind of tell the story where the strategy was, you know, make this a desperation play where everybody's watching on pins and needles. You see what happens for that last Monday night championship game, where nobody could predictably say what happened, rather than start Geno Smith as your quarterback. With all that said, man, no, there was no special sauce at all. You know, there's definitely better decisions on all these things to go one way or the other with it. What I will say this is that I was very observant in the first playoff round that we had. And I have a feeling, I'm looking at my phone, that Evan's going to be calling us any second now when he gets off his bender, wakes up. But I remember him playing Sam in that first playoff round. And I remember Sam sharing what he was sending over with Kyle Pitts, trying to get the head game. And what I took note of from that was, like, I need to get in Evan's head. Like, whatever I do, the special saucer strategy is just, you know what, man, he's going to talk trash one way or the other. So get ahead of it, start talking trash now. And then with that said, obviously we played each other in that division round for us. And I know we were going back and forth. I know you probably put in like 1,000 transactions to take every quarterback from everywhere because guys kept getting hurt. So there was that, which was really fun to deal with. But hindsight 2020 would have probably gone with Caleb Williams a lot sooner. But I knew, you know what, the only strategy I'm going to put in once I knew I was going to at least have the one victory and the reward over you is, like, I'm going to just keep messaging and torturing Evan to try to get in his head and see what happens from there. What ended up happening there, you know, obviously was the last thing was went with Geno Smith. Wouldn't have done that hindsight, obviously. Instead of going with Caleb, I think would have been a much more comfortable win. But I knew that Monday night I need to go with something, and I probably got no shot of winning at all. When he's got Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Puka's like a gift.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, you know what? I'm going to just start one player who looks like they got a fighter's chance of having a decent game. Hopefully it's going to be Colby Parkinson. We'll see what happens one way or the other and just roll with it. And then obviously I think we all got a chance to watch Monday night, and we got a really nice theater show, you know, so that was fun to watch. But yeah, cannot predicted that, you know, luck is a fun turning tide. There's no special sauce, man.
Well, I appreciate that rundown, Bree. Just to touch on a couple of things that you were saying, I brought up that game, Sam versus Evan in the first divisional round, and yeah, I think it was that 40-point performance on a Thursday night that really set the tone. The scary part was that Sam had the only tight end that could have dealt with that for 40-point performance, and Trey McBride, who put up 31 points himself. But the matchup ended up being 150 to 106. And yeah, the absolute historic just blow up game on a Thursday night has to be one of the most mentally crushing ways to start a playoff championship or a playoff game. And as you pointed out, Evan is not afraid about getting the scythe out and going for the jugular when he knows there's an opportunity. So I hear you on that strategy, trying to get ahead of his antics there.
He never gets it right. He's going to call us like right now, I swear, man, once he wakes up and realizes.
Yeah, and I would say that we'll touch a little bit more later on with the dynamics in the game. Hopefully, yeah, we'll give it a little bit more time here to hope if we can get a Wake out of the Reaper and get his side of it as well. But taking another step forward into this season, is there anything looking back at the season that you felt like you would have done differently outside of the championship game? Just looking at your week-to-week play.
Would have started Caleb Williams. Would have done anything with that. Here's just to if you want a little inside scoop on this. So for that championship game, I'm leaving New York City. I'm driving New York City in the afternoon with Caleb, who's probably getting himself knocked out for at least a nap, and then my wife too. And we're gonna get out to Maryland, Silver Spring. So it's like a 4 or 5 hour drive, like nothing crazy. But I remember just doing a quick pit stop, and then I remember looking at the phone that we had on WhatsApp and Springfield mentioning the flu games popping up, and Ted Millen was the first one to pop up. I was like, what is going on here? This is making no sense. And then DJ Moore too on top of it. And so at that point, I had about 20 minutes from us like just stopping over at like the pit stop at the supermarket. I'm like, I got to do something right now, man. Like this needs to happen ahead of time before I think it through. And at that point, if DJ Moore's playing and he's sick, Williams isn't going to do anything. And so that was like my immediate like adjustment or response to, you know what, we're going to go roll with Gino and see what happens. Terrible decision. Absolutely terrible. Gaudy decision that you could ever make. Don't start him. Stuck with Williams on that standpoint. But yeah, we like the theatrics. Clearly, we really like the theatrics. And I think I already told you about Colby and the other ones here. I just really wanted a 13% chance. That's it. So that's more or less it.
Got it. And looking back at just like stats wise, I was trying to pull it up. I know I didn't do like a cumulative stat sheet for the show, but you did end up leading the league in moves again with 127. Sam somewhat in the ballpark with 108, and then me, tipping the scales at 97. Couldn't quite get into triple digits, but that continues to remain seemingly a stalwart of your methodology is to just churn and burn. I don't know what that 127 works out on a weekly basis, but you're essentially working through half a roster every week. And then on the trade side of things, again, I don't have the exact numbers ahead of me, but I believe that you, Springfield, myself, Sam, and I don't think I'm missing anybody, but at least us four hit double-digit trades, which was potentially expected for you. I think that Springfield coming out and making as many trades as he did was a little unexpected. I think Sam and I, again, have our own wild card styles that, you could count that in. But the trade embargo at the beginning of the year, and it was less of a trade embargo so much as it was just trade with Brendan, right?
But yeah.
How do you feel like your moves went this year, Brendan? Because you seem to stay pretty consistent with your high volume of waiver moves, and you also stay consistent with your large trade volume. Despite, I feel like you started off really slow because you were getting so many offers, and I remember your approach early on the year was to kind of take things slow, but you definitely picked it up. So how do you feel like your waiver activity and your trades affected your season?
So here's what I'll say on that. Ken, you're analytical. You're extremely analytical. So when you said trade with Brendan, it was based off of you going over the numbers and what you were reading, the story you wanted to tell. And the one thing I'll point out to that, I think week 5 through like 8 or whatever, it began looking like, wow, trading Rishi Rice is like a terrible, terrible move to get rid of that guy, or like whatever you're doing there. But the one thing I want to point out and flag with is like Mahomes as the quarterback was telling an entirely different story that I don't think any of us were encapsulating or like prepared for. And obviously I know I got him at like $6 or $7 on the fantasy draft, but like that was not a fun investment by having a quarterback by any means ever. And obviously the torn ACL is one thing, but really what the moral of the story is there with me is like, quarterback has always been like a haul for me, no matter what I could do throughout that season when it started in the playoffs. And that stood And I think what we learned was when Pat wasn't himself, I don't think Rashi was necessarily everything as the season progressed, over that time period. Um, there's just it's really easy to focus on the numbers and data with everything here. My one advice to you, I'm not going to tell any secret sauce, but you have to have more of an intuition and have a better read of what's going on than just knowing that the analytics are going to tell a story, because that's not how the stories work. You have to have your own hypothesis, your own like inkling or feel of something that's going to happen. And if you can go with that, you can go with it. I think you were right about Luther Burden, and I don't think it was data that you were reading that story when you went with Luther Burden, and I think that was a better call. I just think that, yeah, man, the volume is going to end up telling you a different story. So if you want to go back to data or anything like that, more transactions, more than not, I think tends to be a good way to go with things. I didn't try to get 127 or 130 when I got them, but within that time frame, you just have to adapt, and I was like forced to adapt in a lot of ways. That's how we ended up there, man. So got lucky on a lot of ways with it. That's
Yeah.
big thing.
I'm looking back, and you're right on the money. You had $7 on Rashid, and again, not overly prepared for this. Look back, but just thinking off the top of my head, again, we'll touch a little bit more on that trade. But yeah, you're right. Mahomes had kind of been middling. He'd had like a 13-point game up to then. He did turn it on right after that, and was a pretty big force. Maybe not a pretty big force. He had a few pop games, but yeah, I hear you on that one.
Right.
And then now that we're here, I also would like to just take another look at that 70 mark, which was kind of the arbitrary threshold I set for like activity, right? Because to follow up on your last point, I'm also a big advocate of activity, right? I think that I historically would sit on teams out of fear of not knowing what was going on. And as I've stepped into the light of knowledge to whatever percentage that looks like, I've landed very close to the same ethos as you, that the best thing to do is to say you don't know, right? And just cycle that bottom of the roster. And so on that note, we've got the final count of moves. We had Springfield with 47, Jay with 41, Graham with 32, the Lukening, a very respectable 38, the Titan Reaper or the Titan Sleeper, 56. Tom was 68, almost just, kind of reminding of what's that shuffleboard, right? Just kind of sliding to that magic 70 number and coming just short to maximize that. Against Sam, hitting high with 108. Ben, maybe a little unexpected with only 28 moves. Again, you had 127, I had 97. And then Casey and Hunter bringing up the rear with 9 and 17, respectively. So I hear you on the activity side. And I would say that that early prediction of putting the arbitrary 70 out wasn't particularly the greatest metric. I mean, I know it does roughly sort that way. The only one that doesn't fit the pattern of moves to success is Sam. But I think that you could look at Sam's playoff run and say that his moves were definitely a huge factor in him making the impact that he did. So I've asked you your special sauce. I've asked you what you would have done differently. What's something that you wouldn't change, Brendan? I know you've said already that there's nothing you would have changed. But strategically, let's say, what was something that was working for you this year that you don't plan on changing?
So the biggest thing that I can give insight on that is adaptability, right?
Yeah.
And when I say that, we're 14 weeks, right? We have 14 weeks where you're going in to finding out which of the 6 teams are going to have a playoff run or have an opportunity. We have that one opportunity for that bye week, I think, between the big cat, between Gato and I. And when you have that, if you're not adaptive, if you're not willing to make those changes within that, and I think Reaper was really adaptive. He was super, super adaptive. He had a read in it. That you'll see the results change within the season as it goes, right? Like anybody can go 6-2, like 7-1, or whatever in those like first 7-8 weeks, and it can be telling you a different story. But if you don't find a way to change and move, I feel like you need to continue to always like be creative and make those changes. So like, I'm not trying to sell special sauce. Like when I say it again, I just know that I always need to continue to look at a change. I'm sure, with the way this league is, there's going to be people reading at it too, and everybody's going to be open and try to inquire about something. Sam's someone who always inquired about trades, right?
Yeah.
Tom too. And here's the one thing I'll say to you about that is Tom got into a conversation with me about the Rashi Rice trade, right? And I remember going there, and I think, I probably made a regretful move or decision when we went into it. But at the same time, I remember trading away Kenneth Gainwell sometime in another trade with him. And then whatever the time frame went in there, it was just, he was one of those ones where he gave like a 1-for-1 without questions being asked. He offered me Gainwell for, who did I give him? It was Rashid Shaheed. Do I remember that right?
I don't remember the details, and it's too early for me to do any good.
Rashid Shaheed in real time got traded from New Orleans to the Seahawks.
Right. Yeah.
Okay? So when he got traded in real time, he was just like, they were still trying to figure out what the hell they were going to do with him. And so that was going into it. But before people like figured out what Sheed was going to be one thing or the other, I got a trade offer on Saturday from Gato offering me Gainwell. And it was straight up for that. And I think it was like just making the move there. I'm just, I can't tell you or predict you one way. I remember asking him like, hey, what are you thinking about doing that? But that ended up, he offered me and I went with it, and it worked out. And I'll say this, like between the trades that we did, I think that was probably the most beneficial trades that I ever got opportunity to do, out of all the trades that we did have. But at the same time too, if you do enough trades, if you go through that volume enough, it's going to end up on the right side of things as things go with you, whether you're offering it or someone else is offering to you. But you have to always be open and stay active. That's what I would say with the trades.
Yeah. So some interesting points you brought up there. Again, I think that the volume for me is the biggest takeaway with your play style, and that idea of opening yourself up to I want to call it gut call narratives, right? I think that's maybe a way to say it, right? That you operate with your gut, right? And if there's a scenario that your gut says go, then you pull the trigger on it, right? And that in the volume, because I'm fairly certain you got to a dozen, plus or minus one trade, right? So you looked at those trades, you went with your gut, and you believe that volume is what got you there, right? That your gut, given enough opportunities, is going to get you to the promised land, right?
I'll bring that back for a second here. I didn't mean to cut you off, so forgive me for not trying to interrupt. But the biggest gut that was the victorious on any of those was Sayonara Griffin Hunter. He was by far what everybody wanted to like him to veto these trades or thought like this was analytically like a terrible decision. He was spot on. He was right. Between Chris and Lawson, I just want to give that kudos out to him because I think that's funny. It's easy to evaluate any trades in real time when they're going through a deadline that we think it's a terrible decision. But a lot of times different stories get told by the season.
Yeah.
So, kudos to Hunter. He's beaten me twice. I'm 0-2 against him.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think that, again, Hunter is a strong voice, and he's not afraid to challenge whatever the current narrative is. And again, we'll touch on a little bit more that specifically with the CD trade, right? Because I think that encapsulates that whole idea a lot better. But I think you're right. That's a good example of him standing up against, going against the grain. And turns out he was right.
He was.
In lack of Evan's presence, I was going to ask him the same questions about his special sauce, anything that he would have done differently, and anything he would have changed. My takeaway from Evan and his season was ceiling. That's the one word that I see in his draft. That's the one word that I see in his play style. And from the beginning to the end, it just seemed like he really went after a team with a big ceiling. And I think that with the dawn of best ball and set and forget types of rosters like that, where strategy is really pushing you to go and find ceiling players, regardless of whatever the floor is. I feel like Ev, slightly innovative in that sense. I think that he's been kind of ahead of the curve. You're never wrong. You're just early with that ceiling type of play. And we sure saw it this year with a huge amount of ceiling from his team. I did that exercise in the playoffs, where of the playoff teams, if you took everybody's individual season best, what would their total score be? And he was well north of 200, and that didn't include the 40 points from Pitt. So if you add that into the mix, I think he would have been north of 250, which is an astronomically high score. When I think of Evan and his Titan Reapers, I think of ceiling. What comes to mind with you when you think about Evan's squad and play style this year?
Yeah. Well, I think the history told us 9 times out of 10 he would have been a league champion.
Yeah.
He said that, and I was pretty convinced that he was going to win that game too. I not thinking about it, I just remember the PCL injury. Drake London comes back, but looked like he was in pretty good shape. Pitts already had like clearly defined himself as being the guy. And that's the point too. And then Puka is Puka. I mean, I remember, if I remember right, I think that if I'm remembering this correctly here, Ev would not, and I honestly would not, he would not trade anybody Puka for anything. And I think he made the right decision there too with that. Like, I think that was an easy one to tell that story. So there's no telling it, but like, yeah, I think on a lot of different scenarios that happened, in any other week or at any other time, I wouldn't have not have been the league champion this year. That would have not happened. It would have been it. And it's funny how things happen sometimes. Sometimes there's something in the air. Sometimes there's like an oar there. Sometimes you just start Colby Parkinson and you see what happens there. But yeah, no, I don't know what to tell you other than good fortune. I would have not been the champion this year on that side of things. And Ev would have maybe there's a fighter's chance he wakes up in about 5 minutes or so and he gives us a call. So I'm hoping on right now that he jumps on this one. I'm still waiting for you, buddy. Jump on this pot. We need you here.
Yeah, I'm hearing stick with your studs, right? Looking back at his draft, he went Puka, Drake, London, Josh Allen, Omarion Hampton, Breece Hall with the majority of his money, right? And those were the guys that got him there, and he stuck with the studs, right? I think the other thing that comes to mind when you think about maintaining that value was I had to have offered Sam a dozen or so packages for Gibbs, right? Where I was maybe, giving him 60-40 or 60, maybe 65-35 at times. But he always demanded, the king's ransom for him. And I think Evan did a good job of holding the line as well, and understanding the value of the ceiling and the value of the studs, especially when they hit. So turning the page from Evan, looking back on our big topics from this year, we've touched on it a tad, but the preseason started in part with me putting out that piece around focusing on the Brendan Tom trade paradigm and requesting the league to get to you before Tom did. And wanted to get your thoughts on that, looking back on it some 3 months back.
Are you talking about the trade with Brendan?
No, just I put out the piece at the beginning of the year highlighting the transactions that Tom had made the year before, and had noticed that at least the year before that it was the trades with you that seemed to have worked out in his favor. And I put out the call basically for the rest of the league to make trades with you before Thomas can make trades with you. And that eventually turned into me blasting the group text on a near daily basis at times, and reminding everybody of the kind of market value of Tom's team. And I think potentially slowed his trading at the beginning of the year, even though he ended up with a pretty regular amount of trades in the end. And same thing with you. I think you were getting a lot of trades early on. If not, you were being a little more cautious. So Do you think that had any effect on the beginning of the league, or was it just another, Ken lit adventure?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to answer this question correctly. But I noticed is like in the first 8 weeks that this is just reality of things. In the first like 4 to 8 weeks, anytime we start the fantasy season, right? 4 to 8 weeks, you're kind of getting near the halfway mark. You can't really predict, or everything can look within that time frame that a story is already told. And what I mean by that is that what's done is done, right? Whatever Reishi is the best, CD is the best. You could say all these other players are like, they're it. You'd be an idiot if you gave away, Christian Watson for this or whatever. That's the story, right? And the reality of this is that story adapts and changes really, really quickly over that time frame. So I'm not here to like make like a conviction over one thing or the other. We kind of talked about going with gut with all that, but when it comes to those trades, I don't think it's wise. If I'm giving anybody any advice with this, I just don't think it's wise to be so convinced the numbers are telling me this, so the numbers mean that this will change. And that's, you can get a different story to being told. The narratives can change really, really quickly after that mark, over those last 6 weeks, after those last 8 weeks instead. And when they change, you get a much more compelling story to watch. And I think that what that tells you is that different things can happen, right? You can get a whole different one to tell you one way or the other. So you just don't know who's going to make the playoffs one way or the other. I just think that I think I already talked about the adaptability being like the biggest thing that matters more than anything. That's being willingness to be wrong and not convinced that one thing is going to happen one way or the other. Just be adaptive. I think the wise thing that you can do with all this, because if you're willing to change and willing to be adaptive, you got a much more chance to turn the corner. Whether you're starting off like 2-6, maybe you end up 8-6, right? If you're starting off, 6-2, maybe you're going 5-8 or whatever it is, 5-9.
Yeah.
It just, you never know what can happen with these things. So it's just, you have to be adaptive regardless. That's what I would say with it. You're okay to be wrong.
Yeah, I think the dirty secret in fantasy is there's a lot of luck involved, right? And so you can do your best to, navigate the trends and build up these stories. But the reality is, it's a game that's being played with an oblong ball that's going to bounce and do weird things, injuries, right? So yeah, I hear you on that one. Sam pivoted early on from doing a matchup by matchup basis to turning the Shadow Brigade into a burgeoning fantasy novel.
You get the playoffs.
And I made the playoffs with a virtually new squad, having abandoned the Shadow Brigade in the meantime. I remember fondly reading that first pivot away from kind of like the one-to-one matchups and just being in love with the concept. I think that I really enjoyed reading all of the Shadow Brigade pieces, not only from Sam, but from Tom. And I don't know, we never got Springs, did we? And we never got mine. But just thinking about building out that fantasy universe was a fun treat this year. Do you have any memories around the Shadow Brigade, whether it be Sam's squad or the fantasy realm?
Yeah, he got me on that trade that I did with him. I think the first trade I did with him early in the season, it was Ryan Robinson, the backup running back, I think, for the Niners. And then I forget who else he gave me to. I think something with Jerry Jeudy that I got. So that I'm not looking at the data. I'm not reading anything. I'm just going by memory. But it was a 2-for-1 there. I remember that one with him. And I think we did some type of other like bulk trade where I ended up with Ted McMillan on it, and we found like a good deal. I think it was the beneficiary of the first trades we did early on. And then I think the last bulk trade that we did like sometime near the deadline worked out for it, between Sam. And then the one other trade that I have a recall on, I'm not trying to bring up Brigade on this one, but we had one with Jay where I gave him the behemoth, that monster, to try to get a more group of guys that helped out. So I think that was a fun trade to do.
Yeah. The stepping forward, I know, and we've touched on it some. The first trade controversy of the year, I would say, if you count, my embargo as just being, more of like a broad trends because it wasn't really a trade, but was the Rashid trade with you and Tom. I believe I raised a stink about that one, and if I wasn't, then I'm fairly certain a few others did. And my memory, again, without having done a ton of research on it, was that you traded Rashid 1 week before he started playing when he came back from his suspension. And so I think that the thought there was just odd that you would carry him for the 5-6 weeks and then not play him and then trade him to Tom for what seemed to be a pretty fair, like 50-50. And I think the chatter that I remember was that if you had shopped him around more, that maybe you could have gotten more value. And then just back to my point with the opening, Tom slowly aggregating studs and strengthening a squad throughout the season via trades. What's your take on the Rashid trade you did with Tom?
Yeah. So I got him for a cheap price within the draft. I got him because we knew he was suspended for whatever it was, the first 4 or 5 weeks. I forget what it was, right? 4 weeks, right? Okay. And then so we have week 5 going on. A couple things that you can take into it. So Travis Kelce's probably at his retirement year going into this. And so he's not as productive. Tyreek Hill is no longer on that team. I know he ended up having that torn ACL or whatever, that knee injury that he had. Like he got badly on Miami. So there wasn't a lot of offensive weapon or firepower. And I think the other aspect of it too was just more like, hey, Mahomes is not he's not the same guy this year. Like this is like a dud year for him. If I had realized that, trust me, I would have not had him for pay for him that I did at that quarterback. That was a bad decision for myself. But with that said, I think there's no arguments about Rashid or Rashi Rice being like an absolute animal. As much as he is an animal, here's the only narrative or story I can tell you of this. He cannot be as productive or be as great when the Chiefs as a team, they don't have, the same talent that they usually have. And I think that's really what's going to the place of Mahomes really having a difficult struggle and fight over with the year. I think if Mahomes had more weapons to work with that were healthy, that weren't old, whatnot, I think Rashid would be having a phenomenal game. He's young. He's 24. He's 25. I think he could be doing incredible things. But the reality of it is that, Mahomes wasn't himself. Because he's not himself, he's not going to give the same opportunity for Rashi. I think that's what ended up being the case of it. He gave a couple 20-point games. Like he still did pretty well, but he did not end that way. That was not the story narrative you can tell for those last 4 or 5 weeks of the season.
Yeah. And that was kind of the point. I was off on Rashid, and it was 6 games that he was suspended. And I think he rattled off 4 or 5 straight, 20-point or about so games. But coming back from the knee injury, that was why I was off of him, that I thought that he wouldn't last. And so I think you nailed it on that one. I think just in the, the short term, him rattling off 4 or 3 or 4 or whatever it was, 20-point games, just optic wise doesn't look great. And then we already touched on the Hunter trade as well, and I was bringing that up. And just a side note, because I was looking at the trades, Tom did 4 trades. He did 1 with me and 3 with you. And again, that last one with you with the Rashid one was pretty meaningless, but the other 2 again had some big players in it. And so now looking at Hunter's trade docket, again, I was the first one to toss Kraft and Worthy over for Warren, but the big trade that had the league up in a tough for quite a while was Trey Tucker and CeeDee Lamb going to the Titan Reaper, and Sayonara was catching Khalil Shakir, Jake Ferguson, and Christian Watson coming back from that.
Come here. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Come here, pal.
Oh, you're good.
You want to say hi to Uncle Ken? Come here. Come here.
Hey, Caleb.
Wait, say hi, Uncle Kendall. What do you got there? Have you been drawing your shark? Hold on, I gotta show you this too. I didn't mean to interrupt the show. This is what happens in it. It's been drawing this thing.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah,
I love his shirt, by the way. It looks like he's got the universe on his shirt. He's got a space shirt on.
where'd he go? Get over here. Sorry. Hey, on your no, thank you. That's my chair. Come here. Move. On your feet. There, come here. Is that a megalodon or a great white? It's a megalodon shark, but they're extinct, aren't they? Okay.
I don't know if they're extinct. It looks like you got a megalodon on the back of your chair there, Brendan.
All right. Well, continue to talk while I'm getting pushed over here. Sorry. I'm listening.
Yeah. No. So on that trade, we eventually got Hunter's side that Hunter's playing the NFL game and looking at the wide receiver ones that he got. And I think most of the league was looking at the fantasy value. And I raised the idea of a vote for the veto of the trade due to the unbalanced nature of it. And the commissioner, without an official vote, I think kind of took a temperature of the room, and we ended up not vetoing the trade. And luckily you survived that shark attack.
Yeah, we were alive here. Sorry about that. But yeah, you were talking about the trade. Sorry, I know you were talking about Trey Tucker and CD. That was with Hunter.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, and I think for me on paper, it comes down to Hunter looking at the trade from like an NFL perspective, right? He got a few wide receiver ones and a great tight end. And then I think most of the league was looking at it from the fantasy value side. And if you were to look at the fantasy value, it was very lopsided. But again, we ended up not having a veto. We ended up letting it stand. But it absolutely kicked up the dust in the group chat and got everybody going. So what's your memory on that trade, and what do you feel like its impact has been on the league?
Sorry, just so I know, are you, which specific trade are you talking about my memory about? I just want to make sure I answer this correctly.
Yeah, we're talking about the trade between Griffin Hunter and Titan Reaper himself, where Trey Tucker and CD went Evans' way, and Khalil Shakur, Jake Bergson, and Christian Watson went to Hunter. Yeah.
Yeah, my insight on this is I remember kind of being inquired about it first, asking about the veto, and I remember someone being open to it, looking at one way or the other, and being like, yeah, I guess it's that trade. But the hindsight 2020 with this one, I think the biggest lesson that we can have here for like fantasy football till death in these leagues is like, whatever you do, especially if you're just responding to a trade that just went through, I highly, highly advocate of not voting to veto for a trade, because we're going to be so adamant, like on the top of the scale of saying like, this is why this is the worst trade ever. This is why this person's an idiot, because all these things. And you can make all these points, those reasons of feeling why you're right and that you are right. And, you know, there's a chance that you could end up being right. But what I tend to kind of tips the scales, and we talk about the oblong ball, and we talk about fortune, we talk about luck. I am pretty convinced now these days is like things change really quickly. You could be right now, but being right now doesn't mean you'll be right 4 weeks from now, 2 weeks from now, or 8 weeks from now. It just never turns out that way. And for that point, you know, the Christian Watson aspect of it, the trade that Hunter ended up on, he's right. I mean, you know, he didn't just beat me by whatever it was, like a couple points when we were doing the GG. I think it was week 3, if I remember right. But the last week of the season tore me to pieces. So there you go. And he was spot on there. You know, hopefully he wasn't starting off with that hard of a start. Yeah, I just going back to that, I think the lesson, if I had to make a catch for this, I think that it's really, really wise that none of us try to vote to veto trades. I don't think it's a good idea for us to do that. I think the league ends up being a much more interesting story than doing that.
Yeah. And one of the takeaways, when I was doing some of my, you know, research analytically, trying to come up with the fantasy value of this stuff, one of the things I was looking at was Fantasy Calculator, which takes like millions of trades from public leagues and averages them out to come up with values, right? Yeah. But it also lets you go look at, if you know, you pull up CD Lamb, like what has CD Lamb been traded for in like the last 24 hours, right? And I remember, I don't know if it was specifically CeeDee Lamb, but it was in doing this process. Some of the recent trades, it was like CeeDee Lamb for like the Dallas defense, you know, like someone did straight up, you know, I was like, and that's like the actual bullshit trades, you know. And then I think that kind of transitions in nicely to the next big event we had, which was Hunter exiting the league. My perspective on Hunter's exit was, I think there was this imbalance between what I think he was seeing in the league, right? And I think that trade is kind of a maybe not perfect encapsulation, but an encapsulation, right? Where Hunter definitely has his view of fantasy football, and I think the majority of the league had a different view, especially on that trade. But that's not to say that Hunter didn't have a very valid line of reasoning, you know, that he eventually in text, you know, provided for us. And in contrast, right, to like trading CeeDee Lamb for like a defense, right? Like that's like the actual like vetoing type of stuff, right? Whereas this one, like I'm sure there was something, or not sure. I mean, again, like Hunter put out what he had. He also brought up that he hadn't. This wasn't like a snap decision. It wasn't just because of the trade. This is something that he had been, you know, thinking about for a while. He also brought up like the clique nature of the group, right? That we have certain friendships within the group that are just there from, I think, historical reasons. I think is probably the easiest way to draw that line. So when I talk about Hunter exiting the league, what comes to mind for you, Brendan?
Well, what, Hunter exiting the league?
Yeah.
Give me a little more insight on this. So forgive me, guys. He's not, as far as the information I knew, maybe I'm misreading this. I didn't think he was leaving the league altogether. No? Or did I mishear that?
Yeah, he did. He officially withdrew from the league in a text a few weeks ago. And yeah, and if that's not shocking enough, Brendan, the next bullet point is Graham left the league as well. So we are without Hunter and we were without the commissioner. So yeah, Hunter updated his name to Sayonara, you know, kind of tellingly.
Yeah, makes more sense. Yeah, not good. I really hope people don't leave their league like the way they do in general. This shows you guys how out of the ball I am in reading these things, or not totally like processing everything as they go. So 18 years is a pretty long ride, to say one way or the other. I guess there's some adaptability with it. If I had to pick, because I know that obviously I left the league too for a couple of years, or like whatever it was, a year. I really, really hope, especially if we're going to go 18 years, going on 19, going on 20 or whatnot, I hope we find a way to always make a return to get the same people in with it, because I think that's what makes this league really fun. But I understand also there's somewhat of a exhaustion and burnout that we get from going through this route. So no harm, no foul with anybody if they need to make an exit when they do it. I think I just hope that the story turns itself corner over time. Clearly, I'm just an idiot out of myself right now when I'm looking at the sayonara. But no, I think I read the tea leaves a little bit differently. I hope there's always another chance for a return with people, right? I left some time and then we came back. So I hope we get more people back. This is a sick league. This is an awesome league. It's always better when we have people come back.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just kind of lump Graham into that as well, right? I'm of the same mind, calling this podcast just the closing of a chapter, right? It doesn't mean that the book's over, right? But that we've got Hunter with his exit, Graham with his exit, real quick, did you have any thoughts on Graham's exit before we transition to out in space?
His was more clear to me within the conversation, and sometimes when we go through WhatsApp, we get in conversations. It's just there's a lot of information to digest and detail. Sometimes they're more direct information. Sometimes they're more like reading tea leaves. And reading tea leaves, it's not always easy to understand quite what people are saying there. But with Graham's, I think he was much more transparent of making that decision going through, so it was easier to read within that. For me, it wasn't as much of a shocker, but he's won it. How many times has he won it now? Is it 3? How many times has he won it?
I think 3, yeah, because before he was back to back, and I think there was one in like the old days where he took one. So
Okay.
yeah, he came off on a relative high note.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I understand going through the 3P. This can be an exhaustive league, like how active, how competitive everybody gets.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all kind of wear each other out a lot. So I mean, there's a lot of different cases with that. Um, how I look at it this way: when people are exiting the league, I hope they come back. I always hope that there's a place for them to be in there. Um, I wish I never left, but obviously I had to take a break when I did.
Yeah.
I think we're better off. I think this league is better when a different story is told, and we get return of other people to come back. So we're better off when we have the 12 people we have. That's kind of my value.
Yeah. And on that note, I'm a little off on the time because I'm a little out of practice with the podcast. I think we're right at the perfect transition point to go to our final topic, which is friendship. And I asked our friend AI a little bit about friendship, and it said, friendship is one of the most significant aspects of the human experience. It's the chosen family that provides emotional support, shared joy, and a sense of belonging. And in order for a friendship to thrive, there needs to be reciprocity, trust, and safety, shared values or interest, which I think it probably should be shared values of interest, and then consistency. So friendship, Brendan, when I say that word and those other words to follow, what comes to mind to you?
Make it last, right? Like there's a longevity of it. Friendships and leagues always kind of come back one way or the other. And I think that, keep the grip strong. That's what I'll say there.
Yeah. For me, friendship, like that chosen family is a big thing, especially now that I feel like our society as a whole has like smaller families, that like used to be back in the day, right? You'd be on the farm or you'd be like, back in the old country. I'm talking about, a few hundred years ago, right? You'd have a shit ton of people everywhere, right? And you knew everybody, right? Because like that was how the world was, but now we live in this like hyper futuristic society where like everybody lives in these tiny little, sick technology enabled houses with just like 3 or 4 people, right? And the internet affords us connection to anybody, right? Like I'm sure 7 of the 8 billion people, if you hopped on your phone right now on Facebook, you could find them and chat with them just like within the next like 30 seconds, right? Yeah. Like the connection part has just grown so wide, right? And the fact that like we choose who we spend our time with nowadays means something a lot more than I think it used to. And from my perspective, I'm not sure if I chose you guys, right? Because it's like I was born in Oceanside. I grew up right with like the people in the league in Oceanside, and then Tom branched into the wonderful land of Orange, and then that kind of grew the chap tree, right? And from there, like that's like the true hometown, right? Like the old village, right? Like that wasn't necessarily like my chosen family. It was the family that I was born into, right? And to your point, holding on to it, right? That consistency, and the other thing that comes up to me with like that trust and safety, right? That we've gone through all of these shared experiences and had to exercise our friendship throughout that. And so again, those are a whole lot of words, which is probably all that you're going to get out of me for the most part. And then the other thing that comes to mind to me now is family, right? Because it's like chosen family versus family. Like a lot of us have families. And so I think friendship just by its nature is going to change too, right? Because you have different people in your life, right? And your heart is only so big and you only have so much time. And dude, I love seeing your face light up, when Caleb walks into the room, like,
thanks, man.
I, remember taking shots with you in Chapman and doing all the lit adventure, shit that we were in. But, it like truly makes me happy to see you happy, like with your family. And I'm grateful to have had, the chosen family kind of be chosen for me with this league. And, all of those things, right? The reciprocity, trust and safety, shared values, consistency are all things that are still live, right? With or without Hunter, with or without Graham, all those things, again, both Hunter and Graham very directly said, my line's open no matter what. This doesn't change a thing about our friendship, right? And I think that's kind of what stands out to me this year, right? Is just kind of pointing back the spotlight on like what's important. It's that we choose to share our human experience amongst each other, and then what do we do with it in the meantime, right? Because we all got life going, and the world's changing. And it's going to be a fun life that we got going, and we get to choose how to live it. So any of that stuff bouncing off your head, Brendan? Anything coming up?
Yeah, and I know. Yeah, I was getting shocked with it. I think those are really wise words and insights about family and friends, everything there. Things change, like I said. So, whether it's this year or next year going into next season, maybe might not have Hunter or Graham right away. But something tells me a different story will be told for us too. And I think we'll be fortunate to have them back. But either way, they're obviously both of our friends. They're part of our family. We love them. That doesn't change.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. And it's the league's kind of funny, right? Because it's like we'll go dark in the off season,
Yeah.
Like the group chat's already gone pretty dark. I'm sure we'll have a little spark up here, around Super Bowl. We had some chit chat, right, with playoffs, right? Chargers getting smacked by the Patriots. Thankfully you shucked off the Greg Roman barnacle for us, so we appreciate you for that effort. But more than anything, again, like I care about everybody as the individual and on that family aspect, right? And we have people struggling. I think anybody who's got a kid is experiencing that massive change, right? That's going on in their life, right? And like our people that don't have families, doesn't mean that they're not going through stuff, right? I mean, I know I talk to Graham a lot. He's got a lot of big stuff on his plate with the wedding upcoming, with work, potential, just thinking about how you're going to navigate the future, right? Kind of looping it back to the beginning, just like the state of the world, right? I am getting sucked into a lot of the news, which I know I need to set a better boundary with, right? But like, they're the very real aspect of like ICE is cracking down on communities, which include people in our friend group, right? And like, I think that that's something that weighs on me about acting, and how do I support my friends in difficult times, right? And I don't think that times are going to get easier either, right? And so I kind of look back as friendship to be something, again, that's there for reciprocity and is there to like support trust and safety. And so I want to be trusted and I want to be a safe person, but the reality is my track record, has got a lot of untrustworthy and, unsafe things on it. But the beauty of the way that I'm trying to live life today is that it's going, one day at a time. And so, your instinct too about, not to take this point in time and move it forward too much, right? That, that we might've lost Hunter and Graham this year, but that's not to say that in a few years, right, that we might not get back together. But in the meantime, none of our friendships change, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if anything, I just will encourage everybody to reach out to each other and to stay friends, and not let the season go dark and our friendships go dark. Imagery, moons, eclipses, all that kind of fun stuff, right? The light of the world is to share our experiences, like, because we only get so much, right? And like, like your healthcare stuff, Brendan, it's like freaked me out, dude. Like when I heard about your stroke, I was, like that's a big deal, dude. Like I don't want to have to say goodbye to Brendan yet, right? Like you bring happiness in my life, and I want to share that connection for a long time. So I'm rambling now. I love you, Brendan. I love everybody in the league. Do you have anything else you want to sneak in here before we hit the outro button?
Nothing other than, hey, that love's reciprocal. It doesn't change. For anybody that's on their way out, don't hesitate to reach back out. You'll come back another day. I know that will be the case with all these guys. Yeah, I know that was kind of news that we were throwing out there with it. Wasn't planning on talking about that stroke or talking to everybody about that, but I'm an open book. So happy to talk with anybody there. I'm healthy now, happy now, love all you guys, and hope we get these guys back in the league soon.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Brendan. And again, I just double down on the let's try and take a half step forward and not let the friendship light go dark in the off season. I think times are choosing to be optimistic. It's not that we're in dark times, but everybody's got their struggles, right? And our shared experience is our victory over those things. And so, yeah, I love you, Brendan. I'm happy to have you here. I'm a little sad that we didn't get Evan popping up. I was also of the mind that I thought that he would pop up here at the last second. So I don't want to drag on too much longer. It was a hell of a year. The draft was really fucking fun. All of the off-season content, preseason content, the season content I thought was really fun. We definitely had our I'll call it growing pains, right? With the friendships and the group chats and everything, right? And yeah, just the world at large feels like we're really headed towards a defining time in our life. And yeah, I am here for everybody. Like Graham and Hunter said, my line's always open. I think all you guys know that I reach out periodically as much as I can. And I love all you guys. I love you, Brendan. Thank you for being here. And in a universe empty or overflowing with star stuff, I am glad to have shared this moment with you now. You are loved from here until fantasy football, till death. Deuces.